Good morning, beloved. Peace be with you. Today, as we celebrate the memorial for St. Vincent de Paul, we'll just review a little bit what we talked about from his life yesterday for those who weren't here with us, and just apply it to the gospel. We saw yesterday, especially that as you're just looking at his life, he's a man, he's known for being a man that served the poor, did a lot of charity for the poor, but he was actually so much more than that. He, in fact, I don't even think that was his main concern, just one of his many concerns. The primary theme we see running throughout his life is that he is a man who recognized the needs of those around him, or recognized the needs of the community, his parish community around him, and he was a man who stepped up to try to meet those needs with the resources that he had. And so that's what we see Jesus calling his disciples to in the gospel today. And we see Jesus doing that, recognizing the needs of those around him and calling his disciples to step up and fill the gap and get out there and start harvesting and asking God for more laborers for his harvest. So we saw that St. Vincent de Paul, as we run through his life, he first ministered to wealthy people as a priest. He first ministered to wealthy people. And then after he got captured and was imprisoned by some pirates for a couple of years and got freed from there, and then was assigned to a poor parish, poor community, and began to minister to the poor. And then in order to help meet the needs of the poor in his community, he reached out to those wealthy contacts that he had and began to make connections and to minister to the needs of the poor in his community with the wealthy contacts that he had. And we see that he recognized that physical poverty was not the only problem, not the only need in his community, but also spiritual and intellectual poverty. The peasants, they did not know the gospel. They didn't know the gospel. And this is also just his time is, right after the Reformation. So was a lot of confusion out there and what is really the true teachings of Jesus Christ, and different groups going here, there, and everywhere. And there's no social media, so they're just hearing things through the telephone game, right? So you know how that goes. And so, so part of what he realizes, the people don't know the true and full teaching of Jesus Christ. At best, they know partial teaching, but they don't know the fullness. And so he began setting up missions to bring the full teaching of Jesus Christ, what Jesus says, what Matthew calls in the gospel, the gospel of the kingdom. The full gospel of the kingdom of God. And he begins to teach them these things, and he begins to recognize that it's not just the peasants that don't know, but oh my goodness, these priests also don't know. This is, as he's setting up missions and traveling around doing missions and teaching the people, he realizes, well, one of the reasons they don't know is because they're not being taught, and they're not being taught because the priests don't know. Even the priests are getting bad formation and bad training in the seminary. So he began reaching out and teaching and forming priests. And he realized this is only going to get me so far. I've got to go to the source. And so he began, I got to go to the seminary. And so he began establishing his own seminaries and seminary formation and training of seminarians so that there would be good holy priests to make good holy people of God. And he established the Vincentians to do this. This was the first kind of a formal order he established, and he started them. They began seminaries and forming and training of priests, and they did this for about 7 years. And then he joined up with St. Louis de Marillac, and they co-founded the Daughters of Charity, or the Sisters of Charity, to emphasize spiritual and corporal works of mercy as well, to continue ministering to the poor. So he had these two main emphases in his life: ministering to the poor, but teaching and formation of seminarians and clergy as well. And he did this, what we see, the theme is, it's not just like, oh, I love the poor, so I'm going to dedicate my life to the poor. No, he was just trying to meet the needs of those around him in his community. And as he recognized those needs, it moved the compassion of Christ within him, that moved him to then step out of his comfort zone and meet those needs with whatever resources he had. And that's what we see Jesus doing too, the same basic thing. He comes among us, God among us, and he begins to see a lot of needs, a lot of gaps, right? First thing we see him doing is going around to all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues about the gospel of the kingdom. Why? Because they don't know, right? So he's bringing this good news to them, and the truth and the fullness. They've only been taught partial. Remember, they had divisions among them as well. You got the Pharisees saying one thing, and the Sadducees saying something else, and different scribes saying this thing, and then the Sanhedrin and the high priest saying another thing. So there's different factions and different divisions and things going, different teachings, full teaching, partial teaching. And so Jesus is kind of bringing a full teaching of the gospel to the kingdom. And not just bringing it in words, but this is what made Jesus different from all the others out there, is that he demonstrated it in power. He proved God's kingdom is among us, God's power is among us, God's presence is among us, his life is among us. The fullness of God's life is here. The kingdom of darkness is being driven out, kicked out. Let me show you. So it's not just lip service. Let me show you. So he began driving out demons. Right before this passage, he drove out a demon. And then he says he's curing every disease and illness. So he's seeing needs around him, right? There's people sick around. Oh my gosh, there's people sick around me. I have power to heal them. And so he reaches out to heal them, right? This is the pattern of the life of Christ. If people don't know the truth, oh my gosh, Jesus is the truth. So he starts teaching them. Someone's possessed by a demon, he reaches out and brings the freedom of the kingdom of God into their life and drives out the demon. He has power and authority over the demon. So he takes the resources he has and to meet the needs around him. This is the pattern of the life of Christ. And then he calls out his disciple, or he sees more needs. He sees these great crowds. He has pity for them, compassion for them. They're troubled. They're abandoned. They're like sheep without a shepherd. He sees the need, see? And then he says to his disciples, the harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. Ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers. You know, don't just sit there and look at the need and whine and mope about it. You know people like that? You know, complain about what somebody else is always not doing, you know. He says, get your butt out, start asking the master. He knows if they ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest, what's going to happen? The God's going to say, good idea, you go, right? That's what God's going to say to them. Good idea, Matthew, you go. You know? This is always the famous thing, whether you go to an experienced manager in your corporation or you go to an experienced priest with a great idea, this is the response you're going to get. Good idea. You do it. You know, people, they come up to me all the time. You know, someone came up to me, we'll do this. This is a great kind of study on the life of Christ. I said, this does look really good. Okay, can we do it? We can do it. I can't do it, but we can do it if you will do it, because I don't have time to do another study. Oh, well, I can't do it. Well, why not? All you got to do is play a video or lead a prayer. There's group discussion questions already laid out for you. Oh, no, I can't do that. I don't. Okay, then I guess we won't do it. Right? So it's one thing just to recognize a need and moan and gripe about it. Second thing, to recognize a need and then want to tell somebody else how to do it and meet that need. You know. The third thing, to be like Jesus Christ, we recognize a need and we step up to meet the need. There's a lot of people here who do it already, so I know I'm talking to the choir. There's people, you know, they don't have no recognition. They walk around the parish praying the rosary. They walk around the parish picking up trash that they see. They come in on off times and hours, and they go through the pews and they wipe down and clean the pews and oil them up so they last longer. They go through the pews and they organize them because, you know, it's amazing how people can come in on the weekend and storm this place, and then when they leave, they don't take everything with them, you know. Papers and Cheerios and everything else hanging, you know. And so there's a lot of people already who come in, they see needs. They don't look for somebody else to do it. They just step in and start meeting the need. And this is the pattern of the life of Christ. This is the pattern that St. Vincent de Paul images and continues for us. This is what Jesus is asking each one of us. Pray and ask the Father, the master of the harvest, to send out laborers for his harvest. And don't be surprised when he sends you.